As we approach the final stretch heading into the midterms, a new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll finds that a slim majority of those polled, 46%, favor Republican Congress, with 45% favoring Democrats. Joining us to talk about this, Pat Caddell, a Fox News contributor who was a pollster for President Carter, and Chris Wilson, a Republican pollster and former executive director of the Texas Republican Party. Pat, let's start with you. Boy, that is such a slim margin. 45% want Democrats, 46% say they want Republicans to control Congress. Why is neither party jazzed about its respective party?
Well, you know, we've seen these numbers bounce around. A week ago, that same tracking poll had likely Republicans up a plus 11. So I don't think there was a 10-point loss in a week. These polls are all over the place.
Chris, why are the polls all over the place then? Do you agree with that?
There's all kinds of ways to answer that. Yeah, I do believe they bounce around a lot, but if you take one pollster and look at the numbers over time, it's a lot easier to follow something like this. And I'll tell you, our numbers, what we're seeing across the country is Republicans consistently having, depending on how you ask it, on the generic ballot, a 4 to 7 point lead, and on who should control Congress, anywhere from a 6 to 10 point lead. And I think that's completely reflected in the dissatisfaction with President Obama, with Obamacare, and a desire to see a lot of the problems that have been created over the last 5 years be fixed.
But you know, Pat, when we hear about these quotes from voters out there, it seems like nobody really likes either party right now. Why is that?
Well, the real problem is, and I tend to think the real margin's probably in the 4 or 5 generic range. Look, the country is in a situation where people think, you know, the country is in decline, large majority. People believe their children, by huge numbers, will have a worse life than they are. And a majority believe the American dream is slipping away, and neither party talks about it. The problem here is, yes, the voters want to chastise the Democrats, but they're not necessarily in the mood for rewarding the Republicans. And both parties have failed miserably, I think, in being able to get out a message, for instance, on the economy that moves anybody.
Well, Chris, let me ask you about that, because one of the things that Pat has said is that the Republican Party hasn't offered much in the way of a vision. In the last midterm elections, we heard a lot about Obamacare and trying to fix that, but you don't hear that much of a message out of them this year. Why is that?
Well, I think the verdict on who has the better message that the American public agrees with will be tomorrow night. And if Republicans pick up the Senate and win between 5, 6, 7, 8 seats, then I think it's going to be very difficult to argue that the Republican message has not been the successful one. And that's, in terms of a national message, no, that would be a mistake. You go back to Tip O'Neill's famous quote, all politics is local. So Tom Tillis' message in North Carolina is going to be very different than Tom Cotton's message in Arkansas. But again, who wins will be the ultimate judgment of who had the better message and who the American people agree with right now.
You know, I'm not in the spin game. Let me just say this flat out. You know, the Republicans, they should have put this election away in a big way. And they're not probably going to do that. There's still about a 30% chance. But with people believing the country is going in the wrong direction, with the president getting awful ratings, when people think the economy is not working for them, this should have been a much bigger election, and it's not. And that's because the lack of message. And yes, winning this it means something, but it doesn't quite mean what you're saying. That's not a message. That's just saying they're unhappy.
So then to both of you, Chris,
I have to disagree completely.
We'll go right ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, you come out of 2012, and there were articles by national pundits writing that the Democrats could achieve a 2/3 majority. A year ago, national pundits were saying that Republicans had at best a 25% chance of taking a majority. So you take the situation and how much everything has changed from 2012, whenever Democrats' spin was that they could take a 2/3 majority, to a year ago when there was just a 1 in 4 chance, to right now, the Washington Post gives Republicans a 95+ chance of taking the majority. I would say what they have done is capitalize on the messages that have on the public discontent, the dissatisfaction with Obamacare, the dissatisfaction with the immigration problems, the dissatisfaction with the way this government has operated under President Obama, and have done a pretty good job of maintaining that and capitalizing on it.
Gentlemen, we're both going to have to leave it at that. Pat Caddell and Chris Wilson, as you both fairly point out, you know, the numbers are really close right now, down to the wire, and could be all over the place, certainly. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to talking with you again.